I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever home. Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Rippin' Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Rippin' Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Multiverse broadcasting system initiated.
Lasers.
Multiverse connection established.
Lasers.
Hello.
Multiverse connection secure.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is My Life DIY, and
Hi, this is JoJo.
Hi, my name is Ash.
Hey everybody, it's AJ the Rippin' Rabbit.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light.
And you're now listening
to DarkWolf's Den.
to DarkWolf's Den Show on Rippin' Common Sense Radio.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret cave, hidden deep within the wilderness. This is the DarkWolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live across the multiverse from a secret cave hidden deep within the wilderness of Tennessee. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup, tearing through the atmosphere, and tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the DarkWolf's Den Show for Thursday, August 26th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are going to be discussing the legend of the Bell Witch. This is a story that I literally grew up with here in Tennessee. A story that's well known to locals, but not so much around the world. So we're going to bring that out tonight. We're going to do a deep dive into the legend of the Bell Witch. All that and more coming up here in just a moment. But first, today in history. On this day in 1907, master magician and escape artist Harry Houdini escapes from chains underwater in aquatic park in 57 seconds. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the great Harry Houdini. And that is today's Today in History. What an amazing today in history, right? I mean, could you be underwater, wrapped up in chains, and get yourself out? Now that is a true master escape artist, right in front of hundreds of people. I'm sure probably thousands of people at the time. That's got to be very, very scary. And speaking of scary, that brings us to our next segment.
Say what?
And today's quote comes from John F. D. Taft. He says, and I quote, "It scares you though. Let me tell you, don't be scared of anything. It's not good. It's the root of everything bad, everything. Anger, hate, violence, it all comes from fear. It gums up the world machine and complicates the universe." End quote. And I thought that was such a great and fitting quote, especially in today's society. And that is today's segment of
Say What?
Fun fact about John F. D. Taft, he also wrote a book on the Bell Witch. That particular excerpt was not from that book, however. He is one of many authors who have written books on the incredible phenomenon known as the Bell Witch. And this is something that in Tennessee you grew up with. Like I've said before, you're pretty much like told this in middle and elementary school, and you watched a movie, and it's something you know pretty well in Tennessee. But it's not really well known around the world, right? And that's what we're going to do tonight, is we're going to deep dive into the story of the Bell Witch. But before we get into that, let's see who we got joining us over in the YouTube chat rooms tonight. I really wish that us DJs remembered how to use the mute button a little bit better. Sorry about that, guys. Over here we have My Life DIY. Says happy Thursday, My Life DIY. Sandy B says hello, Sandy B. Virillion, also known as Raul. I don't know what the issue is from my end. It seems to be working just fine, so I don't know what YouTube's doing over there. Mandani Mall says hi, everyone. Hey, Mandani Mall. Who else we got here? Terry Taggart. Hey, Terry Taggart. Glad to have you here. Sandy B, and I believe that's it. Champion Sports Nation over there dropping the link for the music. So glad to have everybody here tonight. Over in the DarkWolf's Den Show chat room, we got JoJo's as well as Deborah O'Connor. Deborah, you're not alone. I promise you I am watching the chat. I do see you. You are not here by yourself. And JoJo's is over there. Mandani Mall jumped over to the DarkWolf's Den Show. Hey, appreciate you jumping over there, giving us some time on watching over there. Earth First, Space Later. What's up, guys? What's up, Earth First? Glad to have you here, as well as the Rippin' Rabbit himself, who's probably losing it right now over the fact that I forgot the mute button. Lord knows we've all done that more than our fair share, right? But let's go ahead and get into tonight's topic. And it all starts in the 1800s with a guy named John Bell.
I find John Bell still in North Carolina in late October of 1804. He sells 360 acres of land on the Tar River. John Bell married Lucy Williams. She married John Bell. Ingram's book says 1782 at the age of 12. I would prefer to think that it's possibly later.
And we have to understand this was a completely different time. I do not agree with that, let's be clear, but we're talking about a completely different time where things like this were much more acceptable.
Since the first child was born in 1790, that being Jesse. Frederick Benjamin, in my opinion, Batts, his brother, and Jeremiah and John Bell, possibly 2 or 3 other families came to Robeson County. There's one indication from North Carolina there were at least 11 families in the wagon train that left North Carolina in late 1804, early 1805 to move to Tennessee.
And the Batts will be very important later in this story, but when they were traveling here from North Carolina, they actually witnessed something that is still today a well-known paranormal phenomenon.
As the Bells came across the mountains of North Carolina, they experienced a phenomenon known locally as the Brown Mountain Lights. And actually, they seen balls of light flying up from the ground up into the sky, you know, and it kind of set the theme for what they were to experience later on in years.
If that was their first scrape with the paranormal along this journey, it definitely would not be the last. But the Bells made their way on into Tennessee and set up shop with the Batts and a number of other families in an area called Red River, Tennessee, which we now call Adams, Tennessee. But you see, things weren't as happily as they seemed. See, Mr. Bell and Mr. Batts had made an arrangement after they got here for a sale that went horribly wrong. They ended up becoming bitter enemies over the business transaction that did not end well. And this set up what would later become a very, very deep feud. And it will lead later into some very paranormal sides. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. One day in 1817, John Bell was inspecting his cornfield when he encountered a strange-looking animal sitting in the middle of a row of corn. Shocked by the appearance of this animal, which had the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit, Bell shot many times. The animal vanished. This was the first documented manifestation of an entity on the property. Bell thought nothing more of the incident, at least not until after dinner. That evening, the family began hearing beating sounds on the outside walls of their log home. The mysterious sounds continued with increased frequency and force each night. Bell and his sons often hurried outside to catch the culprit, but always returned empty-handed. In the weeks that followed, the Bell children began waking up frightened, complaining that rats were gnawing at their bedpost. Not long after, The children began complaining of having their bed covers pulled from them and their pillows tossed on the floor by a seemingly invisible entity.
From my research, Kate Betts was the daughter of one John Williams Jr., Lucy Bell's older brother.
Some say that Kate Betts was the reason behind the haunting. Betts was a spiteful old woman who believed that she had been cheated in a land purchase by John Bell. She told Bell that she would get even with him and that his family would pay for what he did to her.
Now, for the record, this is two separate business deals that have gone bad between a Bell and a Betts. Make no mistake, though, Miss Kate Betts, was not the nicest of people in the world.
There was a man by the name of Edwards down on his all fours trying to find salvation, according to Ingram. Kate, instead of going to her pew, goes down front, sits on the back of Mr. Edwards, flattens him on the floor. He begins to holler, "Oh, Lord, I'm sinking," believing he's having a religious experience because her hoop skirt has darkened out his eyesight. She sits there. The preacher begs her, Suggs Fort begs her to get off of him. "You're smothering him." She said, "That's fine. He's getting closer to the Lord. Let him suffocate."
Some believe that Betts practiced witchcraft and conjured up a spirit to kill John Bell.
Now, Kate Betts gets the credit for calling this spirit, and here's why it's thought that Kate Betts was behind this.
Ironically enough, the spirit called herself Kate throughout the haunting. A series of strange beating and gnawing noises manifested around, and eventually could be heard inside the Bell cabin.
There were all kinds of noises like chains rolling down the stairs and scrapings and funny sounds, and it got to be an every night thing, and it was really a torment.
They first thought that some of the neighbors were playing pranks on them, so as they got louder and louder, they were keeping the bells up at night. They couldn't sleep.
They began to see the strange birds and the animals. Dean began to talk about seeing animals in the field that were big as human beings and could talk, and that was the slave of John Bell Sr. And he told a lot of stories. He talked about, a donkey talking to him. He talked about big birds too, as did the Bell family in general. But Dean told a lot of the stories in the early days.
So it's just not one person's account. There is a number of eyewitness accounts here. Would you guys be scared? Let me know in the comments. What we've heard so far, the 1800s, you just had interesting words with your neighbors. You know you don't get along with those. And now your house is experiencing weird creatures around it that are talking to you, as well as light poltergeist activity already. Would you guys be scared? Would you upturn tail and run, or would you stick around? Go ahead and put a 1 in the chat room if you would stick around and tough it out and continue on like old John Bell did. Put a 2 in the chat room if you would rather just turn tail and find a place not so haunted.
Betsy was born in Robeson County, the first child of the Bells to be born here. The one that supposedly the spirit, the witch, the poltergeist, whatever you want to call it, tormented the most.
At least the one that got tormented the most at this time.
One night, their 14-year-old daughter, Elizabeth Betsy Bell, was awoken by the now familiar sounds. When she tried to investigate, she found that her hair had been tied in knots around the bedpost. Unable to get up, she was then slapped repeatedly by an unseen force. Responding to her screams, the family rushed in to find Betsy with red, hand-shaped welts all over her face. Terrified, she described what had happened.
But this was not a solo incident by any means.
She would wake up screaming, and they'd go to her room and get a light lit, a candle, whatever they had in those days, a lamp, and her hair would be tied in knots. The covers would be on the floor, and of course she would declare that every time she'd pull the covers up, it would snatch them away from her.
And this is something we still hear in a lot of case files, is these situations like the covers being ripped off of somebody repeatedly at that. And over here in the chat room, we've got AJ the Rippin' Rabbit said, 2, no way, he would go find another place to live. Champion Sports Nation, he's on the fence. Might stick around, would consider leaving. Sandy B with the 222, she's definitely running for the door. Terry Taggart with the 3. There wasn't a 3, but she says she don't know. Terry Taggart, very on the fence about things. I like that. My Life DIY with the 2. That is over in the Rippin' Rabbit Hole chat room. Hello, Earth Daughter. Welcome. Danny Mall over in the DarkWolf's Den Show chat room, talking about the animal earlier, said hair of a dog. That's funny. Kate, that rings a bell. There you go. JoJo's with the 111 saying she would stick around and tough it out.
Did so many things according to what Ingram wrote in 1894. I guess some of the obvious things were the whelks on Betsy's face, the handprints where it would slap. They would hear the noise, see nothing but see an imprint of a hand. And then the boys.
That's right. Not happy only tormenting the youngest girl. It now is raised in abilities and has started to torment the boys also.
And it wasn't long before the youngest sons would also show the same hand-shaped welts on their legs and faces.
As much torment as this spirit has already caused amongst all the family members except John and Lucy so far, it actually had taken a very special likeness to Lucy.
But it loved Lucy, and when Lucy became sick one year, which I believe was in the fall of 1820, it is credited with helping bring her through. She had pleurisy. Dr. Hobson at Port Royal was called, and there was some question as to whether or not she would live, but the spirit would sing her religious songs.
Now, up to this point, reading this case file and, listening along, I'm sure you guys would determine that we're dealing with a demon, right? It sounds like a very demonic presence so far. However, I've never heard of a demon that sings religious songs.
And coaxed her along and dropped hazelnuts on her bed for her to eat, and grapes from the woods from mysteriously would just appear out of the ceiling.
So this is something we don't see in a lot of haunting situations, is the apparition of objects right out of thin air, and it would drop these things right onto her bed, and apparently they weren't poisonous because she actually got better. So it's very strange that we have this in this particular haunting case. This is a case that is one of the most powerful and strangest I've run across in all of my years.
And then when she was better, it credited Dr. Hobson with saving her life. All the time this is going on, John Bell's health is deteriorating.
And we'll get back to John Bell here shortly, but there was a lot of other very interesting haunting aspects that were going on, even just on the property, not just to the Bells.
Over the next few weeks, visual apparitions began to appear. The slaves reported seeing strange birds and animals, some of which they claimed could talk.
I don't know about you, but if I had an animal appear in front of me and start talking, I'd be a little bit more than tripped out. How about you? Wouldn't be able to grab that phone camera quick enough, right?
News of the haunting spread quickly and far wider than anyone anticipated. Many people from surrounding areas, and some from quite far away, came to the Bell family home to witness the poltergeist's activity. The entity, who was initially quiet, would later have no qualms about making its presence known. It especially made its feelings towards John Bell apparent.
And this case would actually draw the eye of a very popular historical figure.
Eventually, news reached Army General and future United States President Andrew Jackson. Jackson decided to take a small group of his troops to the Bell home and make camp there for a few days. One of Jackson's men claimed to have brought along silver bullets and bragged to his fellow soldiers that he planned to use them on the witch and kill her.
And yes, like you guys, I know how ridiculous that sounds, that a silver bullet would have any effect on a poltergeist whatsoever. But remember, this is a different time.
As the group neared the Bell property, the wheels of their wagon seized and would not move, despite the repeated efforts of the troops and horses. Almost at the point of abandoning the wagon and returning to Nashville, Jackson supposedly apologized for the behavior of his soldier. Immediately after this, the wagon began to move freely, as if nothing had happened, and Jackson's troops arrived without further incident. Despite planning to stay several nights, the group returned to Nashville after only one. And although it is not written in any official document, Jackson is reported to have said, "I would rather face the whole of the British Army than spend another night at the Bell House."
Now that's really got to give you an idea of how terrible things had already gotten at this point. If Jackson says, "I would rather face the entire British Army than spend another night in the Bell House," that's a pretty bad house. because the British Army we fought against for quite a while to get this country to begin with. So if a haunting is worse than that, that's got to be a pretty rough situation.
A committee was formed, and an investigation started.
When you hear the term witch, you actually get this mental image in your mind of this old crone wearing a black cloak, black pointed hat, riding a broomstick, That's more or less how our mind, we've been ingrained to think what a witch is.
And thank you, Disney, for the classic witch trope, right? But seriously, the reason the Bell Witch gets named the witch part of it is the idea that Kate Batts was a witch that had conjured the spirit against John Bell to torment him and his family.
So, anyway, the Bell Witch was nothing of that sort. Actually, the Bell Witch was not a witch. She was not a ghost. She was not a spirit. The only thing I can think of actually that would best describe what they experienced a witch would be a poltergeist haunting.
And in today's terms, we know the word poltergeist, of course, and have a different label to lay on it. But back then, they did not. In the 1800s, witchcraft was still considered very much a thing. And you remember earlier, we were told that it helped Lucy recover and her health was getting much better. However, John Bell's health was quickly headed downhill.
As time passed, the spirit continued to torture the Bell family. John Bell was becoming very sick, and on the night of December 20th, 1820, he died.
So, of course, this whole case has been full of mysterious circumstances, but John Bell's death was one of the most mysterious of the circumstances, and here's why.
He got so sick he went to bed and laid down one day and actually never got up. They found him Drew come in one morning to check on him and found he was more or less unconscious, had a strange odor on his breath, and they checked his medicine and found a strange smoky vial sitting in his medicine cabinet. And nobody knew where it come from. Had never been seen before.
And as strange as that is, let us remember that it did apparate multiple types of foods into the room for Lucy Bell and dropped it right out of the ceiling. So to apparate a vial of strange liquid, all of a sudden isn't that much out of the realm of possibility within this story, right?
So they had the same odor on John's breath as what the smoky vial smelled like. So they took a broom straw and put it in a bottle and then run it through a cat's mouth, where the cat turned about 3 flips in the air and just fell over dead,
So now they know that John Bell's been poisoned, but the question is, who poisoned old John Bell?
And the answer to that question is where it really gets bizarre.
And they began to question each other. Was it Betsy? Was it John Jr.? Did Lucy do this?
Speculation as to who poisoned Bell was rife, and when it was suggested that Lucy may have been responsible, Kate's disembodied voice apparently spoke up, replying, "I fixed his medicine last night and gave him a big dose of it. He'll never get out of that bed again." For the first time in US history, an actual documented death was blamed on a supernatural entity.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, and to the best of my knowledge, that still stands as record to the reason of John Bell's death. And it is the first recorded death caused by a spiritual entity in all of the United States. But what do you guys think? We've got a whole whodunit here, right? Is it Lucy? Is it the neighbors? Is it one of the boys? Who killed John Bell? Go ahead, put a 1 in the chat room if you think that the Bell Witch is actually the one that brought in the poisonous vial and killed John Bell. Go ahead, put a 2 in the chat room if you think it was another human, if you will, somebody working maybe on behalf of the witch. Or put a 3 if you're just as puzzled as they were at that time.
Not content with simply killing John, Kate was said to have made an appearance at his memorial.
Legend says he was brought out here on the hill, back over here to my left, and to be buried. And James Johnston was there, of course, the neighbors were there, the bukus of neighbors were there. Lucy had asked Suggs Fort, the Baptist preacher, to preach the funeral, as well as James Gunn and Thomas, his brother, the 2 Methodist preachers in the community. One account says that they couldn't be heard for the noise of the laughing, cursing, and singing in the trees. Another account says as soon as they finished preaching, they began to hear the screeches and the screams. And she sang a song, "Oh, roll me down some brandy, oh," which was a term for, they put whiskey and brandy in barrels in those days. And made fun. And of course, when finally they got him covered up and they left the cemetery, that's when it became quiet at the Bell house, supposedly.
And at this point, it would seem that the witch got what she wanted, right? The whole thing was to make John Bell pay, and that's what's happened. He paid with his life.
After the funeral, her intensity, she just more or less just diminished every day until finally she was just a faint voice.
So the reason that I don't really think this is a hoax myself, and a lot of people have tried to say it is, though I don't believe it's a hoax at all. The reason being, why would it continue after John Bell's death? If he's dead, the mission is accomplished, the goal is done. You would think it would have stopped immediately if that was the case. However, that is not the end of the story as one would think it would be.
She appeared to John Jr. and told him that she would be gone for a period of 7 years, in which she would appear, which she'd come back.
Ingram wrote that things settled down, Betsy got better, and they thought things were over with.
At least for now. But let's see what you guys are saying over here in the chat room on YouTube over there, guys. You know, if you're listening on the radio, make sure you come on over to YouTube and drop into one of the two chat rooms, either the DarkWolf's Den Show chat room or the Rippin' Rabbit Hole chat room. That's right, there's people in both. And let's see what you guys said. Who do you think did it? 1 for the Bell Witch, 2 if you think somebody else killed John Bell, and 3 if you're just as unsure if they were. Let's see what you guys are saying over here. Boiling Frogs says 3, absolutely confused, has no idea. Rippin' Rabbit Hole also 3, not quite sure. My Life DIY, pretty sure it was the witch. Sandy B with the 3, for sure that she's not sure. Earth Daughter with the 2.5, probably a human, but not sure. All right, and over here in the DarkWolf's Den chat, JoJo says he was poisoned. Yes, he was. To Lucy, so the entity to John, the poltergeist, was from Lucy. It's a possibility. It is definitely a possibility. Raw says, night, everybody. Night, Raw. You have a great one, bud. Terry Taggart says fantasy football. No, we're not talking about fantasy football. And that is everything in the chat room for now. And of course, you guys know that music means we have to go ahead and take a network break right here. There is a lot more rabbit hole to dive down in the legend of the Bell Witch tonight. But once again, we've got to go ahead and take a network break. So my name's Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. You're listening to the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show exclusively on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network. Don't you touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Oh yeah, Jerry Hicks and the DarkWolf's Den, the legend of the Bell Witch. Are you enjoying tonight's program so far? I know I am. If you are and you haven't done so already, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. Hi everyone, it's AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. I'll return again tomorrow night, Friday night, to take you down the rabbit hole of pain in cookie dough. That's right, we're going to look at how cookie dough is used as currency and just where exactly in the world you can spend it. That's tomorrow night. Friday, August 27th. Starts at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as all shows do. And then we'll return Saturday night with a look at strange life and the creatures that live it. I can tell you, it is going to be a mind-blowing episode as we discuss some of the strangest creatures on Earth. Again, that's Saturday night, August 28th, and then we'll end out the weekend right together with you. On Sunday night, August 29th, I will have a special guest join me. Justin K. Smith will be here. He is the founder and creator of GetYoursFresh.com. We're going to have a fantastic evening spent with Justin to hear about this new concept that he's bringing to the world that allows us to get yours fresh. And that's going to be an incredible way to end out the weekend right together with you Sunday night. And it's going to end out the month of August, as it will be our last broadcast of August 2021. Can you believe it? My, oh my, how time does fly. Next month, the first weekend of the month already. Beat Eugene and Tuesday night videos. Listen, if you haven't done so already, please hop on over to theripinrabbithole.com. There you can sign up for your exclusive backstage pass. It's going to give you unfiltered access down the rabbit hole to where the conversation continues after the show. Recently, a new group has appeared there under groups. It's called Tuesday Night Videos, and it's the archive group. So if you miss any Tuesday night videos, they're going to start to be archived there in that group, which is absolutely fantastic. Of course, Tuesday night videos held exclusively in the Backstage 24/7 VIP chat lounge with your host, Champion Sports Nation. It's absolutely free to do so, so please take advantage of the invitation and join us where the conversation continues after the show down the rabbit hole at ripinrabbithole.com. We'll return to tonight's topic, the legend of the Bell Witch, and Jerry Hicks and the DarkWolf's Den Show for Thursday, August 26th, 2021. You're listening to the Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole.
Re-establishing multiverse connection.
Hello.
Connection re-established and secure.
This is My Life DIY, and
Hi, this is JoJo.
Hi, my name is Oz.
Hey everybody, it's AJ the Rippin' Rabbit.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light.
And you're now listening
to DarkWolf's Den.
To DarkWolf's Den Show on Rippin' Common Sense Radio.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the DarkWolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the DarkWolf's Den Show for Thursday, August 26th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in tonight, we are covering the legend of the Bell Witch. That's right. A story, once again, that I grew up with pretty much, and everyone around Tennessee knows really well, but a lot of people around the world don't, and it's an incredible story. So far, we've heard of a spirit that has been tormenting the Bell family, creating apparitions within the house, and has even become the first spirit to kill somebody on American soil. And once again, you would think that's the end of the story. And the witch, or the spirit, said that it would leave for 7 years and it would return. Of course, one would think that was a veiled threat. However, that is very much not the case.
Joshua Gardner asked Betsy to marry him, and that would have been sometime in April, early part of 1821, at which time Richard wrote in his diary, it was like the voice of thunder. All this mess is back again. Now it's talking again. Betsy sees the little girl hanging from the tree again, the apparition, and it's telling her, please, Betsy, please don't marry Joshua Gardner. Please, Betsy, please don't have Joshua Gardner. And of course she becomes very nervous again, and legend says that she refused to marry him at that point, either give him back his ring or told him she couldn't marry him. And he moved away. That's what the book says.
But there is an odd little twist in this part of the story with Betsy.
Betsy was a student of Richard Powell, as was her younger brothers, Joel and Richard. And if you believe his statement, periodically he would visit the Bells and tell Lucy and John, how beautiful their daughter was, how intelligent she was, and there seems to be some affection there, even though we know officially he was married to Esther Scott Powell. Their marriage was over the period of time, which included the legend of the Bell Witch, which means as he was teaching Betsy and Richard and Joel and all the rest of the Bell children, he was married to Esther Scott. She died in 1821, which was the year that Joshua and Betsy supposedly broke up. The witch supposedly broke up their little escapade, and Joshua moves to West Tennessee. And in 1824, I believe it was March 21st, it was in March, that he marries Betsy Bell. She becomes Betsy Bell Powell.
So it is incredibly convenient that the witch or the spirit broke up the couple, in a couple years later she ends up marrying the school teacher. Could he have been involved in this? I highly doubt it. There's a lot of paranormal activity that I could not attribute to just one person. If so, he was one of the most dedicated ever, right? But I don't know. It just, as odd as it seems, I don't think that he had a part in any hoax in this. But the timing, you got to admit, is very intriguing. And in 1828, as promised, the entity returned. However, most of the return visit centered on John Bell Jr., with whom the entity discussed the origins of life, civilization, Christianity, and the need for a major spiritual reawakening. Of particular significance were its predictions of the Civil War and other major events, some of which she did miss. The entity bade farewell after 3 weeks, promising to visit John Bell's most direct descendant in 107 years. That year would be 1935, and the closest living descendant at this time was Nashville physician Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, a neurologist and John Bell Sr.'s great-grandson. In 1934, Dr. Bell published a book about the Bell Witch, likely to raise awareness of the spirit's impending return. The book contains the first ever account of the alleged conferences between the entity and John Bell Jr. in 1928. The author's father, Dr. Joel Thomas Bell, had allegedly taken notes during the conference and, upon death, passed them down to the son, Dr. Bell, who published no follow-up to his book and died in 1945. He is buried in the Bellwood Cemetery in Adams, Tennessee. However, into modern times, the hauntings and the strange occurrences have not ended. As a matter of fact, they're very well still in action.
Even today, strange things have happened to people in Adams. Many claim that it's the Bell Witch.
Of course, I grew up here in Springfield, and I live in my grandmother's house now. And that house, for whatever reason, became a site of having odd occurrences happening. I think the first thing I remember happening was my grandmother, when she lived there. We lived 3 doors up, and she would take a nap in the afternoon, and she called up one afternoon. I happened to be 7 years old at that point in time, and she was really scared, and she asked Dad to come down. So I went down with him, and we went to the house, and we had to get her to unlock the door. She had the door locked, and so we went in, and she was just terrified, and so she said, search the house. So we looked the whole house over, and we didn't know what we were looking for. We checked the windows and under the beds and the closets, and nothing was in the house. And then we came back down, and Grandmother was in the kitchen still scared, and she goes, now look. And we looked, and on the floor were all her china. It was all scattered across the kitchen floor. And she proceeded to tell us that she was upstairs taking a nap, and she heard this crash that woke her, and she came downstairs and saw all her dishes on the floor. And where they came from was a butler's pantry. It was a pantry in between the dining room and the kitchen, and it was in a china cabinet that was built into the wall with locking doors. And when we looked at the china cabinet, all the doors were open, and every piece of china was out of the cabinet onto the floor.
Which, again, is clearly a haunting activity of some type, so this has not quieted it down at all. As a matter of fact, on the same property there is a cave, a very well-known cave, called the Bell Witch Cave, right? And this cave has had a lot of interesting activity in and of itself. Not only have paranormal researchers looked into this, but there has been legend of what happens if you take items from the cave.
Like the Bell Witch Cave, It's always told everybody that goes in the cave not to take any artifacts home with you, because for the bad things that happen to people that did, there's been several instances where somebody would pick up a rock, put it in their pocket, go home with it, bad ththings happen to them.
It is said that these items are very much cursed, and bad things from car accidents to divorces to, all the bad stuff you could think about, breaking bones, the whole 9 yards would happen. All this sudden bad luck would happen to anybody who would take items from this cave.
Charles Bailey Bell, who wrote the Black Bell Witch book, which is still sold at the museum and in several places, called the Bell Witch of Tennessee, donated a part of John Bell Jr.'s land to the city, which was called Adams Station at that time, to build a high school, or the city of Adams, town of Adams. And in 1912, a high school was built on the property of John Bell Jr.'s. In 1916, they added the 12th grade. Prior to that, you could go from the 1st to the 10th grade. It remained a school of 12 grades until 1949, and then it became just an elementary school and closed in 1975. There have been antique malls and different activities in the building since that time. The city now owns the building, and stories have begun to accumulate of seeing a little girl in a green dress was the first story that I was told. Antique people that owned it 10 years ago keep telling me that they keep seeing a little girl who would come around the corner, they'd see her, then she would dissipate. Long blonde hair, a green dress.
And you guys remember the apparitions or visions that Lucy had, I'm sorry, not Lucy, Betsy had, was of that same girl in the green dress hanging from the tree by her arms. It's interesting that this would come back up all these years later. And you have to wonder if that is the true nature of the poltergeist. Maybe it was that little girl that had something happen in the green dress and was hung from a tree, or something traumatic happened. Maybe that's why she's back to tell her story. Maybe she was the Kate of the Bell Witch haunting. Perhaps it wasn't the witch Kate Batts at all who had summoned any kind of spirit, or maybe she did. Maybe that's the spirit that she did summon. There's so many maybes in that, right? So many rabbit holes we could go down knowing the case files that we know.
And the folks that have it today tell me they feel a presence, they've seen a haunting, but I didn't give it a lot of credence until about 2 years ago when a man came in the museum one day.
And as you guys know, that is my favorite part of any case file, when you have a skeptic turned believer.
I worked for the city for 26 years, and one day I look out my window of my office and I see a black Camaro with Montgomery County license. I could see it well, but I couldn't understand why the man didn't get out. So I went out on the porch to see if everything is all right. He jumps out of the car. He says, "Where's the cave? Can I get in the Bell Witch Cave?" And I said, "Buddy, you're at the wrong place. You're at the water department." He said, "You don't understand. I've got to get in the cave." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" He said, "Last Friday night," which would have been 4, 5, 6 days before, I came over here and took a tour of the cave, and they warned me not to take anything from the cave. And I took a rock. And he said, when I got home Saturday morning, my wife left me. Went to work Monday, and I lost my job. And they notified me the day before yesterday they were kicking me out of my apartment. He said, I got to get this rock back in that cave. I said, well, if you just go up the hill and go to the entrance, I'm sure the owner will come out, and he will meet you. And sure enough, he did.
And that, of course, is just one of many, many examples of people who have taken items who have been more than desperate to return them.
We could hear different things walking in the house, cabinet doors shutting, voices, and two of my sons live, their bedroom was up over ours, and a lot of things happened to them boys up there. They would, my oldest son, it tried to talk to him, because it more than once it called his name out talking to him.
So there's still vocal activity from the other side also, even in modern times.
Current, the famous ghost stories of Tennessee. And the Bell Witch was the third one of this mini-series, and we watched the first two, and then the Bell Witch was coming on, and they started with Andrew Jackson's carriage coming on the property. And as soon as the picture came on, or the show started, the picture went out. The sound was on, but the picture was gone. And when the commercials would come on, we'd see the commercial, and then when it would go back to the the show, the picture would go out.
And of course, you would think this would just be a broadcasting error, right? Maybe they were having troubles at the studio. That's what one would assume.
Well, we were all upset about it because we had all gathered in the room to watch it. And so Dad called next door to Mr. Moore's house and told him to turn his TV on. And he did, and he had a picture.
So clearly it's not a broadcasting error. Maybe it's just an error with the TV. Even though it showed the commercials, maybe it's just an error with the TV.
He said, well, you mind if I come over? He said, no, come on over. So he went over next door, and as soon as he got in the house, his picture went out.
Well, that completely negates all the logical explanations, folks.
And so we never saw the story. I don't know what was about the story that we weren't supposed to see, but that was really odd. And as soon as the program was over, our TV was working properly again.
I would really love to know what was in there that he was not supposed to see at the time, because whatever the entity was determined to make sure that it did not allow them to see this story.
My youngest son, after my two oldest boys moved up, my youngest son, he lived up there. And I guess it liked him because it never bothered him. But one of the oddest occurrences I ever had upstairs was in his room was I went up there one evening. I was looking for something that he had borrowed and left it up there in his room. He wasn't at home. So I looked and couldn't find it, and I started to go back down the steps, put my hand on the handrail, and I've always said, what are you looking for? And of course that made cold chills all up and down, and I looked around, wasn't a soul in the room. My wife, she was downstairs in the kitchen. And the only thing I could say, I can't find what I'm looking for, so I left in a hurry.
You know, it's interesting when you have a legend like the Bell Witch, but when you have so many modern day accounts of activity still on the land, it becomes more than a legend, right? It becomes more close to home, if you will.
One thing is, this is the oldest continuous ghost story in America that still lives today. A few years ago, we were lucky enough to have a guy that was a Juilliard graduate that went to school here in Adams. His name was David Alford. Wrote a play called The Spirit, and that is put on every year in October in Adams. It's about the only one that still has members of the actual family of the Bells that is included in that.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the legend of the Bell Witch. That's right. Fun little fact real quick. My daughter and my grandchildren also carried the blood of the Bell family. That's right. My daughter, honest to goodness, my daughter absolutely refuses to go onto the Bell Witch property. So if I do any case files or investigation myself, I'm going to have to go by myself. I sure can't take them. And I don't blame them. They tormented her descendants. But what do you guys think, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think that the legend of the Bell Witch is true, that there's a haunting and a paranormal occurrence that is going on even to this day in the backwoods of Tennessee? Or do you think perhaps we're barking up the wrong tree? In the end, ladies and gentlemen, all you can do is look at the evidence, apply a little common sense, and you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the Darkwolf's Den Show for Thursday, August 26th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the den may be closing, but don't you worry, the weekend fun is only just begun, folks. That's right. Make sure you come back tomorrow, Friday, August 27th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central on the Rippin' Rabbit Hole YouTube channel and the rippinrabbithole.com, where our buddy AJ the Rippin' Rabbit will take back over the airwaves with an all-new episode of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. That's right, the animals of radio, we just don't quit. And AJ will be back to talk about paying in cookie dough. That's right, there is a place apparently where you can literally pay in cookie dough. I would have so much cookie dough, I wouldn't have room in any refrigerator or freezer that I had. I would be the richest man on the planet. Probably the fattest one too, truth be told. But AJ will talk about paying in cookie dough even though that's kind of what regular currency seems like, right? On Friday, August 27th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network. Then on Saturday, August 28th, he comes back for another round of the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show. Once again, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows here on the network start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. AJ will be talking on Saturday about strange life. I live a strange life, but I have a feeling he's talking about the strange life that exists in the world. Their life that exists in places that life is not supposed to traditionally exist. I'm sure he'll be talking about all that and more on Saturday, August 28th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. And at the same time on Sunday, he comes back for a very, very special episode as he welcomes special guest Justin Smith to talk about Yours Fresh, living fresh life, right? From healthy eating to healthy living, all that and more will be covered, I'm sure, with the very special guest, once again, that will be joining AJ, Mr. Justin Smith. I know I'm very much looking forward to that episode, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are too. That is on Sundays, August 28th, 2021, August 29th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. And that will round out the weekend here on Ripon Common Sense Radio and the RiponRabbitHole.com. Speaking of the RiponRabbitHole.com, make sure you hop on over there. That is RiponRabbitHole.com. That's right. Over there you're going to find a plethora of fun things to do. Like the Down the Rabbit Hole section over there, where you can literally join the social media part of the site and drop all the information you would like to help us out down the rabbit hole. Whether it's about current events or the paranormal or, whatever information you would like to pass on to the rabbits, drop it down the rabbit hole and we'll be able to see it without the censorship of those other garbage sites, Facebook, things like that. And also, while you're over on the RiponRabbitHole.com, make sure you come on over to the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's right, where the TNV happens, the Tuesday night videos next week. So come on over and get comfortable in the lounge, ladies and gentlemen. There's so much fun stuff over there. The groups pages, just so much fun stuff to do on the RiponRabbitHole.com. Ladies and gentlemen, with that said, my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And on behalf of AJ the Ripon Rabbit, Walt House, Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, everybody involved in Ripon Common Sense Radio, as well as Tom Bayless in Red Shed Studios, who has supplied us with this amazing music we're listening to right now. Get down with it, Tom. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for a custom soundtrack for your next project, make sure you contact Red Shed Studios. Make sure you tell them Dark Wolf sent you, that's right. On behalf of all these folks, ladies and gentlemen, as well as our incredible mod team on YouTube, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. And remember, until next time, stay awake, but dare to dream. That's right. How yeah. Good night, everybody.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown, and I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the grass is green, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland